We are at the 2014 Legislative Summit, and we're joined by two of the nation's preeminent political pollsters, Republican Neil Newhouse, Democrat Geoffrey Garin. They addressed a general session of the summit and have graciously joined us to talk more about their research and what it means for the nations. Welcome to both of you. Mr. Newhouse, how does what happens on the federal level affect elections in the states?
Everything goes downhill. So when you have a political environment that's really kind of structured to be responsive to what's going on the federal level, it has a tremendous impact on local elections. For instance, I mean, if there's a Republican tilt in the federal races, that goes all the way down to state legislative, local, city council races across the country, and it impacts turnout, impacts voter enthusiasm, and so it has tremendous impact on those close legislative races across the country. So I mean, everything goes downhill, and these local candidates, they're not as well known generally as a congressional candidate is. So they're not as strongly tied to the voters, and so they go, those races go back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And frankly, where there are competitive races, Democrats at the national level are more likely to invest in voter turnout and getting Democratic voters out to the polls. And in states where there are no contested federal elections or Democrats aren't competitive in those elections, Democrats at the state legislative level are always very concerned that nobody's doing the hard work of turning out the voters, and nobody's really putting the resources in that are necessary to make the hard work of turning out voters successful.
Mr. Garin, how much of a burden on Democrats is President Obama's low approval ratings, and how much should congressional Republicans be concerned about the low regard in which Congress is held?
Well, that's kind of the $64,000 question of this election. I think there are probably some laws of gravity that will ultimately apply in terms of the impact on President Obama's approval rating. But I think this is a different kind of an election cycle than the one we had in 2010, when it was all about President Obama and the Democrats. People took their frustrations out on them virtually 100%. Now, since the 2010 election, the Republican Party brand has really degraded considerably, and it's top of mind. People are unhappy with the way the Republican majority in the House has conducted itself, and its contribution to gridlock and the kind of its affiliation with Tea Party Republicanism. So, one of the questions is, to what extent will that leaven the kind of Obama impact? I think it will have some. I also think what it is very likely to mean is that these races will be contested campaign by campaign, really about the candidates, and less about whether you like John Boehner or President Obama. But as I said, some laws of gravity ultimately apply here.
Yeah, not surprisingly, we see things similarly, but with some nuance. I mean, President Obama's approval rating sitting at 42%, about 10 points lower than he was in 2012, the percent he got in the last election. That has a tremendous depressing effect on some of those Democratic constituencies that he depended on in 2012, younger voters, Hispanics, African American, unmarried women, those kinds of groups. It's gonna play a significant role in this election in terms of setting the political environment. It's not in any individual race going to be determinative, but it's a hurdle that Democrats have to overcome. And that's a much bigger hurdle than the impression of Republicans in Congress, for instance. I mean, neither Republicans nor Democrats in Congress are very popular right now. We jokingly refer to the congressional job approval rating as at 10% as being the friends and family program. Only friends and family approve of the job they're doing. That's essentially true. But I think it's the overall perception of Obama that really sets the political environment, and then inside that political environment, the campaigns have to do what's best for them in their individual states, and it comes down to the individual races.
One of the things when we talk to voters in focus groups and ask them their feelings about what's going on in Washington, President Obama is actually not the first thing they say. That what they really talk about more than anything else is that nothing gets done, and their kind of resentment of mindless partisanship. And I think that does create a little bit of a plague on both your houses kind of attitude. I think one general impact is that turnout, across the board may be lower in this election. Voters really are disgusted, and they're probably not crazy to feel that way.
Mr. Newhouse, your presentation at the session today painted a picture of a sharply divided political landscape in which hyperpartisanship, you said, has never been greater. Why do you think we have arrived at such a state?
Well, it wasn't quickly. I mean, it's happened over a number of years, and any number of things that have helped contribute to it, everything from redistricting to the primary systems. But it's very clear that Republicans and Democrats have never been further away in terms of how they view each other. The polarization has never been greater in terms of how voters view the president between Republicans and Democrats. And it is beginning to have a serious negative impact on the political system. That's one reason why, as Jeff refers to, voters are frustrated that nothing's getting done in Washington. So it's impacting how Congress operates. It's impacting the perception that voters have regarding what's getting done in Washington, and the frustration level is going through the roof.
And in some ways, state legislatures share in the blame here, at least in those states where state legislatures draw district lines, because they draw these lines where you don't really compete for the middle. The elections are decided in primaries, and so that all you care about is the voters in your party. And there have been some challenges to the way we draw district lines, and that may have some effect if people who are running for election feel, as they do in presidential levels, that you have to be able to compete for the middle. California changed its system so that it's both parties run in the same primary, and it's just the top two, and that's had some impact in forcing candidates to worry a little bit more about the middle.
Mr. Garin, how much of a concern should it be to Democrats? The Republicans seem to have a more motivated electorate. And conversely, do you think Republicans are underestimating the Democrats' ground game?
Well, we have a very good ground game. One of the campaigns I worked on recently was for Terry McAuliffe in Virginia in 2013. We invested a large share of our resources both in understanding drop-off voters, by which I mean people who vote in presidential years but not in other years, and in turning them out. And that was extremely successful. If the electorate in 2013 had looked like it did in 2009, the previous election, we'd be talking about a different governor than Terry McAuliffe. But we really were able to affect turnout in that race. And Democrats, I think, are pretty smart about this and are making very substantial investments this time around. Again, there are kind of issues with enthusiasm that will affect this, but Democrats do have a very good, smart ground game with a lot of proven results in recent elections.
Yeah. The only thing is, it costs a lot more money to turn out an unenthusiastic voter, a drop-off voter, than it does one who's pretty excited about it. But the warning for Republicans is, don't count your chickens before they're hatched. And this is, enthusiasm 75 days out doesn't mean a damn thing. What means something is actually who votes. And if Democrats are able to, to get their ground game going so that they turn out those low propensity voters, we've got our work cut out for us. So there's nothing. We're taking nothing for granted in this election, and the enthusiasm gap we're taking with a grain of salt right now.
Mr. Newhouse, do you predict the Republicans will gain control of the Senate?
I have to, of course. Mark, I believe it. I think we're going to do well. I feel very confident about a number of the races that we've got going. The races are in play. We're within a point or two in the major states, everything from Iowa to Colorado, Louisiana, North Carolina. I feel very confident that Republicans are going to do well, but it's going to be tight. We may not decide the Senate until December December runoff election in Louisiana. That may be the deciding vote.
I'm flip a coin. There are a lot of close elections. The challenge for Democrats is many of those are occurring in very red states, states that Mitt Romney won not just narrowly, but substantially. And it's not that Democrats have to run the table in all of those states, but they have to win a large majority of those close elections in order to keep the Senate.
It could be a late night in November.
Could be.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Great.
Appreciate
Thank
Thanks,
you
Mark.
so much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.